today who will talk about the unusual presidential race in the United States. By unusual speakers, I mean that our guests are not professors of universities, they are not members of Academy of Sciences of the United States. I'm wondering if one exists at all. Yeah? They are political consultants. They are people who can see all the presidential races, all campaigns of the candidates they work with from inside. So then the topic is an insider's look. So what we can see based on what we get from media, from internet, we have images of candidates, some quotes from their speeches, but it's only a tip of an iceberg. But there is a huge underwater part of an iceberg that nobody can see. Maybe 10, 20 years later, someone can confess, like what happened with the debate of Nixon and Kennedy, that they did some trick at the studio to make it warmer, so Nixon was in his woolen jacket and he was very uncomfortable, and Kennedy was prepared for that. So maybe we know that 50 years later what happened in the presidential campaign of 2016. So let me introduce our speakers. Первым я бы хотел представить Стивена Мавильо, президента компании Force Communications. Стивен Мавильо является политическим консультантом Демократической партии США, является президентом этой организации Force Communications. Ребята, проходите, пожалуйста, сюда, здесь есть места, самый первый ряд можете занимать, здесь есть места, там могут подниматься. Сюда, сюда, проходите, проходите. Стивен Мавильо закончил Бостон университет, я также учился в университете штата Нью-Хэмпшир, и с 1994 года, когда переехал в Вашингтон, работал в администрации президента Билла Клинтона, и потом возглавил, с 2008 года возглавляет фирму Force Communications, которая работает в штате Калифорния, город Сакраменто, и, естественно, помогает Демократической партии, помогает кандидатам от Демократической партии в их избирательных кампаниях самого разного уровня. В частности, Стивен Мавильо работал вместе участвовал в президентской кампании Билла Клинтона, губернатора Майкла Дукакиса, который, кстати, тоже был когда-то кандидатом на пост президента США, давным-давно проиграл Джорджу Бушу, и сенатора Гэри Харта, тоже очень известный американский сенатор Гэри Харта. Our second speaker, наш второй выступающий, они будут выступать вместе, господин Рей Макнелли, President and Creative Director of Макнелли Temple Associates, является таким ветераном политических кампаний, более 40 лет опыта за плечами у Рея Макнелли. Он является президентом и креативным директором своей собственной корпорации, компании, одной из ведущих фирм в области политического консалтинга тоже в Калифорнии, но представляет республиканскую партию, Republican Party. То есть здесь мы видим, it's amusing to see how friendly people from Republican Party may be to each other. But maybe during the talk we'll see what the real clash between parties. Рей Макнелли участвовал в десятках политических кампаний, десятках избирательных кампаний самого разного уровня, активно выступал в разных университетах, читал лекции о media relations, political communications в Соединенных Штатах, Канаде, Ираке, Мексике, Нигерии. И, что интересно, maybe Mr. Rey Макнелли will tell us about his experience of visiting the Soviet Union in 1990, 26 years ago, where Mr. Макнелли was providing guidance on how to conduct democratic election. So you can compare your impressions of nowadays Russia with the Russia or Soviet Union you saw 26 years ago. I would like to be as brief as possible, so I think you have an idea now whom you are meeting with, and please use this unique opportunity to ask any questions about political campaigning and political consultancy in the United States. And one more thing about Mr. Rey Macnelly. Mr. Macnelly used to be a board member of the American Association of Political Consultants. It's a professional organization, professional association of those who work in political consulting, and a member of the International Association of Political Consultants. So maybe some of you in the future will become members of this International Association of Political Consultants if you choose this way in your life, this kind of career, being a political consultant. And now I would like to give the floor to our distinguished speakers. So let us greet them. Again, some logistical, organizational announcement. You may ask questions just by raising your hand and asking questions. If you are too shy or you are not very comfortable with talking in English, you can write down your questions in Russian and send it to me, and I will read it or translate, whatever you like. Sorry. But first we'll let our speakers start answering questions.
And we want to re-emphasize that politics is participatory, so the more we turn this into a conversation instead of a lecture, I think the more you'll enjoy it, and the more we'll learn, then the more you'll learn. But first we want to start with what we do. So we're going to do an experiment where all of a sudden you're all honorary American citizens.
Just for 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Don't panic. So that means you get to vote in our presidential election, right?
Yeah.
So who's going to vote for Donald Trump? Raise your hand. Donald Trump. Okay.
Trump for president.
Now who's going to vote for Hillary Clinton?
Clinton for president.
Notice he votes twice.
Why ladies do not vote for Clinton?
My Donald
We'll get to that. How about any of the other smaller parties, the Libertarian Party?
He's the guy who
The
does
Green Party. The Green Party. All right.
All right. This is very much like America. Nobody's not quite sure what to do.
Yeah, so as you know, right now the race is extremely tight, almost even in the United States between the two candidates. This is not the way it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be, if you look back about a year ago from now, Hillary Clinton was supposed to win as the Democrat easily by herself. And George Bush was supposed to be the Republican candidate. And it would be, again, an election between a Clinton and a Bush. But something happened, and his name was Donald Trump.
As a Republican, a year and a half ago, I was telling people my biggest fear was that Hillary Clinton would not be the Democratic nominee. Because as a Republican, we thought she is so damaged, her credibility is very low, a lot of people think she doesn't tell the truth. And on our side, we had 17 candidates, many of whom had been governors, they had solid records of achievement, they had experience actually governing, they had created jobs, they cut taxes, they balanced budgets. They were good, solid, responsible executive leaders. And many of them had worked in states as they were Republican governors where the legislature was controlled by Democrats. So they figured out how to work with the other party and still get things done. But over the course of the primary campaign, we methodically eliminated every good, qualified, responsible candidate and ended up with Donald Trump. Now, he won the primary with only 40% of the Republican vote. 60% of the Republicans wanted somebody else. But because it was Donald Trump who had a base within the party of about 35 to 40% of the vote, he had his votes, and then we had all these other candidates who kept divvying up the rest of the votes. And at the end of the day, nobody could decide who would be the alternative to Trump. And we ended up with Trump.
And so as a Democrat, they always asked, who do you want to be the Republican? And I always said, Donald Trump. He has no experience. He's a liar. He's a little crazy. We don't know how much money he makes. He has never been abroad to talk to any foreign leader, as opposed to Hillary, who's the Secretary of State, he'll be the easiest one to beat, no problem. Well, that's not working out.
It's not working out for either party.
And part of the reason is because Hillary didn't have a free ride either. She had to face Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders, who'd been in Congress for 25 years, accomplished very little. He's a socialist, which in the United States, I think very few people identify themselves as socialists. But he had a very strong message. He was against the establishment, much like Trump was. And he also offered two big offerings to his voters. One, free health care for everybody for free, and particularly for young people, free college, absolutely free. In the United States, a year in college typically is around $30,000. So when a lot of young people heard they could not have to pay $1 rather than $30,000, they got very attracted to him. So he had a huge, or as he said, huge network of support from young people, huge social media campaign, and he suddenly gave Hillary Clinton a challenge for many months where she was expecting to sit back, raise money, and take on the Republican nominee at this time of the year.
Yeah, so now we're in a situation where a lot of Americans wish they had somebody else to vote for. 60% of the Republicans would prefer a different candidate. We don't have one. About 40% of the Democrats would prefer a different candidate. They don't have one. And like Steve said, the race right now is about dead even. And we got 60 days to go and 3 debates. So it's hard to predict exactly what happens. Understand, I was one of the Republican consultants who said, don't worry, Donald Trump doesn't have a prayer to win. He's a clown, he's crazy, he's got no experience, he can't.
So now the election is basically come down to about 7 states. As you may or may not know, the system is unusual in that if he was running for president and I were running for president and he got more votes than I did, but I won more states, I would win, even though he got more votes. Makes no sense, but that's the way it was set up. So for example, we're both from California, the biggest state in the United States. We will not see Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton in our state again, because it's assumed that Hillary Clinton is going to win that state, and so she won't have to spend any time there, and Trump will come to California because he knows he's going to lose. So they go to the 6 or 7 states where the race is very close. Places like Florida, places like Ohio, places like Pennsylvania and North Carolina. Even though those states are much smaller than California, they're what combined to give him the number of states he needs to win. Confused? So am I.
Somebody earlier today asked us to explain what we call the Electoral College, which elects the president in the United States, and we said, no, we can't because we don't understand it. There are very few Americans who really do, but the way it works, every state gets an elector, or the number of electors is based on the number of people they have in Congress. So they get 2 for the 2 state senators, plus the number of representatives they have in the House of Representatives. And some states have 2 or 3 or 4 electors. States like California probably have 50-something.
53.
Florida probably has 30-something. And then the District of Columbia gets 3. So to win president, you need to get 270 electoral college votes. So we don't elect our president directly, but the electors are supposed to vote for the president that their state votes for. Everybody confused?
It's okay if you are, because we are.
Yeah, but anybody here understands it, we'd like you to explain that to us.
Yeah. So, the usual question is, well, how could this be? How could Donald Trump, who even his enthusiastic backers say he's less experienced than Hillary Clinton, is not consistent in his views, doesn't have a lot of plans, and his plan for immigration is to build a wall that everybody says will not work, even members of his own party. He insults members of his own party, including the Republicans in Congress. Yesterday, he said he thought Putin was a better president than Obama, which in our country is like, no one can get away with saying that. And yet, he's tied with Hillary Clinton.
Yeah. And ironically, typically the Republican candidate is seen as the establishment candidate. When this election, he's the populist candidate. He's the agent of change. He's the guy who's going to go in and blow up government and recreate and refashion it. Hillary Clinton, all of a sudden, is the establishment candidate. She's getting her money from Wall Street. She's getting her money from other sources that often go with Republicans. This election is all turned upside down.
And we're both from California, and we feel like we've seen this movie before. And that movie starred Arnold Schwarzenegger, who had no experience, who could barely speak English most days, and suddenly said, well, if you elect me, I can blow up the boxes, I can fix all our problems, everything will be better, just elect me, I'll catch you the details later.
Yeah. You say, what's your plan? Don't worry about it. I'll go in, I'll blow up the boxes.
You care about the environment? Don't worry about it. That was his answer. So he failed miserably. He's probably the worst governor we ever had. We had record unemployment, record deficits, bad education policies, you name it, across the board.
He left the state billions of dollars in debt.
So then he went bye-bye, and now we have somebody who's fixed it all up again, but a career politician, so go figure.
Anyway, so that's the situation we're in. So, you had a question earlier?
Yeah, I had a question. Thank you.
Think of another one.
Think of another one.
Sir, in your opinion, what made Ted Cruz lose? Because he seems like, you know, a genuine conservative, Republican, pro-guns, pro-capitalist, Christian. Why did he fail? Because I think proper Republicans would support him. And personally, I would choose him instead of Trump. I don't like Trump in any way.
Yeah, I know a lot of Republicans don't like Trump in any way. But what happened, there were too many candidates for too long for any other candidate other than Trump to defeat Trump. And Ted Cruz, by the time he was the last man standing against Trump, was too late. Yeah, so we ended up with Trump. But a lot of Republicans would agree with you.
Cruz's strategy was to win all the evangelical Christian votes in Iowa and use that first state to propel him to other places. But he couldn't, because there were so many other conservatives in the race, he couldn't really expand beyond that for a while. And so by the time the end came, it was him and Rubio and Trump and Kasich just found the four. And he still didn't have enough room, to get more votes. The other fact about him is most of his colleagues in the Senate considered him a snake. Very unpopular, very difficult to work with. Fellow Republicans said, they would vote for a Democrat before they'd vote for him because he was just personally
offensive. But, I mean, they were so desperate by the end when it looked like Trump was going to be the nominee, you had the establishment Republicans getting behind Ted Cruz. I mean, that's how desperate they were. But it was just too late. Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Yeah. My question is Bill, because what are you doing here while the campaign is still running?
We're getting an early start out of the campaign.
We were invited here. This week, actually, Monday was a holiday in the United States, so they thought it'd be a good time before things really start, which are starting like today and tomorrow. So we'll be back Saturday, ready to go. But this was a little bit of a vacation week for a lot of people, so we snuck in and sneaked back out. Yeah.
We've been doing work at night though. Morning now back there.
It's 10 hours different, so we come back to our hotel room at midnight and have to go to work for 4 hours, so that's why we look a little sleepy.
May I ask a question, just following on the previous one. What kind of job are you doing for the candidates? So can you explain your typical workday? What kind of advice do you give? Or what is the content of your job assignments? What do you do when there is a campaign? Both. It's a question of both.
Well, what I do personally, I create television advertising, radio advertising, internet advertising, brochures, direct mail. My partner does a lot of the strategic work. He does a lot of survey analysis, vote counting, breaking the districts down into areas where we need to focus on to get votes. He does all the math part.
I work mainly with media, newspapers and television stations that are covering a candidate, or in California, we have a lot of direct democracy where you can vote on things like gay marriage, what else are we voting on? High-speed rail trains, big projects, budgets. We have something that would outlaw plastic bags on our ballot this year, things like that. And I work with the media. I also do a lot of creation of ads for social media, also on Twitter and Facebook. A lot of things you see from a campaign, I do. And I just work with the candidates so they're better when they see a TV camera, that they can actually understand how it works and what to say and what not to say. So that's where I spend most of my time. I was in the Hillary campaign. I was a delegate to the convention. The candidates are nominated for president by people that go to the convention, and I was one of those people that was elected to go to the convention and vote for Hillary.
And luckily I did not have to go to the convention, and I did not have to vote for Donald Trump for president at the convention. And yeah, that's...
Yeah, see, Ray is not unusual. He's a Republican that doesn't like Trump.
Yeah, our big fear is he will do terrible damage, not just to the country, but to the party in the process. But yeah, it's an awful situation for us.
I have a question about the Commander-in-Chief Forum this September. So right after that forum, it was like so many negative consequences for Hillary Clinton because questions were tougher for her, just in my opinion. But now, when we read some articles from BBC News or the New York Times, we see this image of attacked Hillary Clinton who passed this exam very successfully. And in your opinions, how do you think, for whom of two candidates this forum will be more painful? I know will have more negative consequences in the end.
Well, I mean, here's the problem. So everybody expects so much from Hillary Clinton because she's been in the White House, she's been a Secretary of State, she's been in government for 25 years. They know she's smart. Donald Trump doesn't have that problem. The bar for Donald Trump is so low down here. If he can get through a debate or a forum like that, which he lied several times, everybody says, "Oh, he did great. He didn't mess up," and that's his threshold. All he has to do is make it through these debates by not saying something stupid. Whereas Hillary has the burden of proving that she's so much better than him and being smarter. And since he's an entertainer, he knows how to look into a camera and work a camera. He's doing a better job. She's not a natural person at that. And she has said that what she says matters. The words she actually come out of her mouth, those words matter. Whereas Donald Trump, there's no filter. It just comes out, right? So the burden really is on her. And I hate to play the quote woman card, but it's a lot tougher for a woman running for office in the United States. You have to look strong, but you can't look too strong, because then you're referred to as another word that women don't like to hear, and because you're too strong as a woman. And a lot of men, frankly, fear that. The polling is showing that Hillary is very popular among older women and single women. But among white married women, she's not doing so well. She's also not doing well among lower income white men. She's losing whites by double digits, whites overall. Very popular among Latinos and African Americans. So her base of support is a very interesting jigsaw on how she's going to win. But the burden, I think, is your original question. The burden on her is so high. And I think, the instant ratings that came out of that show showed Trump won, even though he lied about his support for the war. And they've also been very critical of Matt Lauer, who did the thing. His own network is saying it was a disaster because he wasn't as tough on Trump as he was on her. So.
Yeah, it's a tough situation. A pollster to the Democratic Party recently said that all Trump has to do, he's come to believe that Trump can be elected president. And he said, but all he has to do is be not crazy for the next 60 days. His job is to reassure American voters that they can trust him as president. Because he's pretty flamboyant, and he does speak openly, and with no filter, and he says whatever pops into his head. Voters need to be reassured that if he's president, he's going to be a little more circumspect and a little more restrained in his actions and in his words. So,
excuse me, was there a strategy for Donald Trump to get voters from the marginal people, especially young, jobless people?
I mean, he did realize that there was a lot of anger and a lot of unhappiness and dissatisfaction among, a large group of voters. Bernie Sanders saw the same thing. His voters were angry. They typically tended to be younger. Like Steve mentioned, a lot of these younger voters have graduated from college. They have a lot of debt, but the job opportunities are limited, so they're not doing the kind of jobs that they prepared themselves for. On the Republican side, with Trump, there have been workers who are angry because they believe immigrants coming across the borders illegally have taken some of their jobs. They've seen their salaries, their wages remain the same for 10, 15 years. They feel like they're being marginalized and they're not reaping the benefits of the economy. So both Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump tapped into that anger. And if you look at polling, about 63% of Americans think the country is headed in the wrong direction. And for Hillary, who represents the establishment, that's a problem. But then voters look at the alternative, Donald Trump, and he kind of makes them nervous. It's like, okay, Hillary, she's the establishment, but like Steve says, they know what she's about. They've seen her on the stage for 20 years or whatever. And Donald Trump, he's got no record as a politician. So they're not sure if he can do the job, and if he does the job, what kind of job he'll do.
As we all know, that you are supporter for Hillary Clinton, and also supporter for Hillary Clinton. So we know already America has banned the economic crisis from Iran on behalf of its atomic problems. So what will be the new solution or the new plans of Hillary Clinton for the atomic problems of Iran? Are the Hillary Clinton has a problem to continue Iran's atomic or not?
Well, I think that the policies you see of President Obama would be very close to see what you'd see with Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
I mean, she's worked in that administration. She was the Secretary of State. She has differed from the president on a few issues, mainly Syria. But she's pretty much in line in Iran. She supported the deal. Trump didn't. He's mocking the deal now. He said he'd tear it up. I think in terms of overall foreign policy, you see a sort of continuation of what we've been used to, and everybody in the world has been used to, is America being strong and aiding places where we need to go. Trump, we don't know. I mean, he said some very provocative things about Russia in the last few days that are very unsettling. And for the first time in my memory, I am seeing a lot of generals and security people who traditionally say nothing at all, or come out for the Republican candidate, coming out for her as a Democratic candidate. And she is trying to emphasize in her campaign that Donald Trump can't be trusted with the nuclear buttons. She can. And here are all these generals and smart people about military intelligence who are saying he would be bad for the country and I'd be good. So very unusual for a presidential campaign. We don't really hear about these issues too much. We don't really hear about foreign policy.
Obama supporting Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
But Clinton also supporting her Obama's plans, yeah?
Yeah.
But there are Americans who have not been happy with the foreign policy. They're nervous and think that the Iran deal was a very bad deal, ultimately, because it's going to give the Iranians a chance to get nuclear weapons. And Trump just recently released a list of a bunch of generals who said he'd be the right president. So voters will see, okay, all these generals are saying Hillary's the right one, all these generals say Trump's the right one, so it's like Now, how do they make a decision? Based on what?
Hillary has more.
Okay, thank you. Sometimes people in Russia are really interested in elections in USA, even maybe more than our own elections, because this choice will have strong influence on our international policy too. So, on your point of view, which variant, Trump or Clinton, is better for Russia or worse? I am asking only for your own opinion.
Hillary, I think, is more predictable in what she do, and whether or not that's good for Russia or bad for Russia, I don't know. But I think it'd be easier for you to predict what she's likely to do in her relationship with Russia. Trump, who knows? He, what, about a month ago or so, said, well, you know, maybe we should pull out of NATO. And for all the NATO allies, that was kind of alarming. It's like, wait a minute. But then he's saying nice things about Putin, so it's like...
Yeah, you know, again, it's right. Just like in business, business likes predictability. They don't like surprises. And on one hand, that surprise might be better for Russia with Trump because we don't know what he's going to do. I mean, he said some crazy things like NATO. How do we solve the problem with ISIS? We just drop bombs on them, unlimited. That's his solution. He said he'd fire generals. Doesn't say who, where, how, or when. But he speaks in such vague thought, like brain thoughts, rather than actual plans and words that we're not sure what he'd actually do. So, I mean, if I were Russia, I'd sort of say, well, I go with the person who I have a sense of what they're going to do rather than risk a relationship that you don't know if it'll get worse or better with someone you don't know.
Yeah, I mean, in a complex world, unpredictability is really a problem.
And, you know, and I'd say that just Hillary Clinton is a diplomat. She was Secretary of State. She knows how to work with other countries. You know, we have a giant problem in Syria where our two countries don't see eye to eye. I think if there's someone who's able to have a real good dialogue about that, it would be her because she knows the situation and the people and the personalities that are involved in all these things and actually could come up with a solution rather than somebody who's walking into the room for the first time and has zero background in history on this.
But all of that said, typically in an American presidential race, American voters don't pick a president based on foreign policy. It's usually about issues back home. It's like employment, the economy, jobs, that type of thing. So, and you know, the economy is not working for a large number of Americans. So again, they're going to be forced with a choice. Do we want to continue with the status quo, the establishment, or do we want to blow up the boxes and try something new? If they believe it's not working, maybe they'll be willing to take a chance on somebody who could make it better. But it's a big leap, and that's why Trump just needs to reassure people that he would be the safe alternative. He's not just an agent of change, he's a safe agent of change. And so far that looks like it's a high bar to clear, but he has 3 debates to prove himself and to reassure Americans. So anything can happen.
Questions, please.
I have another question.
Sure.
So many questions for you, but you know.
We do not limit you to 1 or 2.
The more the better.
But may I ask you 2 questions?
Sure.
The first one, for Russians now, it's almost impossible even to imagine a woman as a president. So, did you have any problems providing the electoral campaign for Hillary Clinton as a woman? So, for this position of president. And the second question is about Trump's strategy. Does the image of Mr. Putin works in American elections? So, he used it so really often, I think, and so many articles in BBC, for example, they said it's completely useless. So what do you think, and why he still keeps this strategy to mention President Putin in his relations?
Do you want to do it? I'll talk about the woman thing. I'll give you a personal example. Older women, you know, and this is just anecdotally, but polling shows it to be true, are excited about the fact that we could elect our first woman president. They're women who, like Hillary Clinton, face barriers in their lives and challenges because they were women. Some of the opportunities were limited, so they fought for their rights and to break down the barriers and to break down the challenges. But for somebody like my daughter, she's never experienced that because of the older women who fought to break down these barriers. She hasn't experienced those barriers, so the idea of electing a woman president is like, yeah, of course, what's the big deal? And with regard to Trump's strategy, he just seems to say whatever comes into his mind based on his mood that particular day. And if it gets some press, he seems to keep doing it. And so far, he's gotten a lot of press. Billions of dollars worth of free exposure.
Yeah, I think running as a woman, as I said earlier, is very difficult. And there are still some Americans that wouldn't vote for a woman, period. There are not a lot of them, but there's some of them. And in a close election, that matters. I was at the convention I mentioned. There were women crying, holding up signs that said, "We're making history," when she was nominated. And to me, that was very moving. I was at the convention in 2008 when Barack Obama was elected. And the fact that our country nominated and elected a black president was a huge deal to almost everybody. I think a lot of people of my age said, wow, we finally gotten over that hump. We finally are getting over racism. But now we're seeing we didn't really, even with a black president. So I think that the sort of breakthrough, Obama sort of stole the thunder a little bit by doing that a few years ago. And now it's less so as a new generation comes up saying, big deal, she's a woman, because they're not used to those barriers anymore.
And over the years, there have been more and more women elected to Congress, elected to state legislatures, elected to city councils. So it's not unusual for a woman to run and win elective office, either among Democrats or Republicans. There are a lot of Republican women that hold local and state and federal office.
But still far short of the number of women.
Yeah, I mean,
there's about 50%. They hold about a third of the offices. So
yeah,
there's no parity.
There's certainly room for growth, but it's not like it's unusual for a woman to get elected.
But we've never had a woman governor in California, for example, either. So, and as far as the Russia question, I think you'll be hearing more about this in the next few weeks. The things that Trump has said in the last couple of days, even Republicans, both the Speaker of the House of Representatives, one of the leading senators, a Republican, has said they're outrageous what he's saying about Russia, how he wants to be more like Putin. I mean, most people in America don't know who Putin is, I have to say, but they don't they still have an attitude of there should be some tension between our two countries and not being buddy-buddy with them. And I think you'll see a lot more generals and a lot more people hitting him on his remarks about Putin and about a relationship with Russia. Because our whole system is built on one person not having a lot of power. That's why it's broken up in between the legislature and the courts. And Trump, with his mega personality, is sort of moving in that direction. And I think there's going to be a little resistance from that.
Yeah.
Questions, please?
Well, my question would be about the political technologies during this campaign. What is new? For about the previous campaign, it was social networks, and for this campaign, what is unusual?
You mean political technologies?
Yes.
We're doing more and more internet advertising, for example. Social media is very important, but we're able to target advertising to specific computers now, and it's just the ability to focus a message to a very narrow group of voters to talk about issues that they care about can be very, very powerful, and it's getting cheaper and cheaper to do that. So yeah, the internet's huge. still need radio, or I mean, still need television and mail and precinct walkers, but the internet's becoming more and more important from our experience.
50% of Americans now get most of their news from Facebook. Not newspapers, not radio, not television. So much more money in political campaigning has gone to that. Do you get Snapchat here? Do you have Snapchat?
Yes.
Okay. That's become a huge avenue for political advertising. I don't think you get Pandora. It's sort of like Spotify. You don't get Pandora. You get Spotify. A lot of money going into there. What's happened is the data mining, which you can't do here, I understand, but the micro-targeting of finding out what you listen to, what you watch, has gotten so refined, and it's still very cheap compared to television, that more and more campaigns are doing whatever they can to literally get into your phone. Because they know that's what you're using all day long and not watching the television. So more technology, more money is being spent in ways to reach by phone. And even on the non-advertising side, Donald Trump doesn't make news by holding press conferences. He makes news by tweeting, right? So, I mean, almost everybody has moved to their phone to get their political information. And Twitter is still a very, very cheap way to advertise. So, this thing has now become the #1 source of news and information. And as consultants, we're trying to get in here as much as possible without being invasive through video, through promoted tweets, through Facebook advertising, any way we can.
One thing, I don't know if this is the case in Russia, but in America, if you get on the internet, and for example, you do a search that you want to buy a pair of shorts, all of a sudden, every time you get on your computer, you'll start getting advertisements for shorts. Say here? Yeah, so that's, politically, we've taken the same approach now that retailers have been doing, and we're saying, well, wait a minute, we can do that with for voters. So we're targeting our advertising essentially, by cookie and by computer.
Yeah, Facebook can tell if you're a liberal or a conservative or a Republican and Democrat, and puts you into a category and starts feeding you ads into that category, and you don't even know it.
So it's like there's no escape.
It's who you like. They've detected the algorithm and pattern to figure out exactly who you might like.
Just one last thing. We're also doing more and more data gathering on voters in terms of what issues are important to them, how they would vote on particular issues, some of the lifestyles, what magazines they subscribe to, what kind of products they buy, and we're putting that all together to put together profiles of different voter groups. And we're able to target messages to them based on that.
Thank you. We can assume that with Donald Trump's immigration policy, he lost a lot of votes from the
Latinos.
Yes, Hispanic. And why did the party decide to go to this direction?
No, the party did not decide to go in that direction. The Republican Party has been working hard over the last several years to repair the damage that they had done based on some of their positions on issues that upset Latino voters. And so I know in California, I mean, we've been working for 20 years to repair damage that was done on some policy stuff. And what's frustrating for me as a Republican is we were just beginning to feel like we were repairing the damage with Latino voters, which we need to win because they're becoming a very big part of the American population. Same with Asian voters becoming, in fact, they're the fastest growing population in America. But then here comes Donald Trump saying, I'm going to build a wall, and all these Mexicans coming across the border are rapists and criminals, and we got to stop them, so I'm going to build a wall. So that overnight, he was able to undo all the work that a lot of Republicans have been doing to try and mend fences with Latino voters. So as a Republican, it's very frustrating.
And if I could be a diagnosis on the Republican Party, it's not, the Republican Party has many pieces to it. There are Republicans like Ray who think and who look at the numbers and say, America's changing. If we don't win more Latino voters, we're never going to win an election. But there are also many Republicans who are very hardline, much like Trump on immigration, say exactly what he says. And the Republicans in Congress have never been able to agree on an immigration plan because of the Trump-like Republicans in Congress. There was a few Ted Cruz among them, and Marco Rubio, who agreed on a bipartisan plan, but that never went anywhere because they were too afraid of the crazies in the Republican Party to move it forward. So when now voters think of the Republicans on immigration, they're going to think about Trump, not among the other people that are actually trying to do something.
Yeah.
It's very important that you pointed out this, that both parties are not very homogeneous. Even when the Congress votes for something, there can be Republicans and Democrats voting in favor of something, and there are Republicans and Democrats who vote against.
Yeah.
So it's not easy to predict. Otherwise, it would be very predictable. You know, like president or the Republican president suggests a law, and all the Republicans vote in favor of it. If they have the majority, the law is passed. But it's not that simple.
Well, part of it, like with Republicans in Congress, some of them come from districts where there are, you know, a good number of Latino voters, so they don't want to go out and make them mad. But it's a really complex issue, and it's one we haven't figured out how to talk about. Because unfortunately, if somebody says, well, I'm concerned about people coming into America illegally, their opponents immediately say, well, you're just a racist. And it's like, well, no, I'm not worried about whether they're Mexicans coming in or whatever. I'm just saying I don't think they should come here illegally. If they want to come here, I think they should come legally. But like I say, it's become a very heated situation where you can't have a real debate about it. And it's an issue we're going to have to resolve sooner than later because it's causing problems for everybody.
That is not a secret that both candidates are pretty old and not that healthy. So, as you said, anything can happen. Then, as never before, we should focus on the person of potential vice presidents. So, what do you think about Pence and Kaine and their current role?
Excuse me, it reminds me of that episode when George Bush Sr. was in Japan and he fainted at the reception with Japanese emperor, yes.
Yeah.
So it was a great disaster for the campaign. His health was...
Yeah, you know, I mean, so much of politics is image, so if suddenly you lean over and throw up on the lap of the person next to you, it makes you look weak. There's an issue now with Hillary's health, and it's driven because she's, in a couple instances, started coughing and wasn't able to stop. So people say, oh my God, she's got some awful disease. She could just have an allergy. But, you know, it doesn't help your image if you look like you have some kind of a health problem. It looks like it makes her look weak, frankly. So the worst thing that could happen to her in the debates is she starts coughing and won't be able to stop for 4 minutes. Even if it's just a simple allergy.
So the question is more about the vice presidents?
Yes.
Well, you know, I think that again shows the difference between the candidates. Hillary picked someone from the United States Senate who was also a governor, who was a human rights worker in Central America, and moved up the ladder and became governor and then senator. By everyone's reports, even Republicans, saying he's a wonderful person, great guy, very humanitarian, religious, top of the heap in terms of who she picked. Trump picked a governor of Indiana who had pretty low ratings in his own state. He was very divisive in the state on many social issues, well-spoken, but Trump wanted to take care of the very conservative base in his party who liked him because of his social issue positions, and so he sort of locked down that vote by picking Mike Pence. In this election, it's unusual. The vice presidential candidates usually are the ones who are out there attacking the other presidential candidate. In this one, we have Donald Trump attacking everybody in sight, not just Hillary, but other Republicans. And you know, Hillary's fighting right back in a large, because she has to, not on the level, she's not calling people names, but she's fighting back on a regular basis here. She has to make Trump the issue. So the vice presidential candidates in this election are pretty low profile because we have such high profile presidential candidates.
But either one could actually do the job because both do have governing experience. One's certainly more conservative than the other, but even though there's maybe some doubt Donald Trump could do the job, I don't think there would be doubt that he could at least do the job. He might not agree with his positions on issues and that type of thing, but at least he knows how government works. And he's more circumspect when he speaks.
Let us forget for a minute about Trump and Hillary. Can you, using your imagination, describe the best candidate from your point of view?
From my point of view?
For you and for you.
You mean the qualities of the candidate?
Yes, qualities, traits, and not Trump, not Hillary, but something ideal.
Without mentioning any name, just
okay.
how the
Our dream
ideal
candidate? Our dream candidate.
Yeah.
how the ideal candidate should look like.
For me, it would be a candidate who has a set of beliefs and values and principles that help guide him or her. But a candidate who also understands in a democracy where there's more, when there's multiple parties and points of view, that you have to be able to listen to and respect other points of view, and then understand how to compromise on issues without losing your principles and your values, and who are willing to work with people that they don't agree with, and work to try and find solutions. That would be my ideal.
So mine would have 3 body parts. Smart head, a big heart, and a strong backbone. To have real core values, to somebody who you can trust, who when he speaks you can believe him and doesn't, go with the wind, and who's not afraid to tackle sort of bigger issues that we as a world have to face, not just the little ones like building a wall, but big things like climate change, and how do we make the world smarter through better education, how we boost an economy throughout the world instead of putting up barriers on everybody's border for trade. I think that's the kind of candidate I'd like to see. Very difficult to do all those things when you're in politics because you're getting pulled in all directions. But there's a few out there. I think the vice presidential candidate, Tim Kaine, sort of exemplifies that kind of person to me. But there's not too many of them out there.
No, we need more of them, that's for sure. But I absolutely agree with everything you said in terms of the ideal candidate.
Other questions?
I have a complaint from the Americans, from the government of America, because I'm from Afghanistan. I'm a student here. I came from Afghanistan. It's 14 years American troops, American soldiers in Afghanistan. As they spent a huge amount of money in Afghanistan, still they couldn't able to secure Afghanistan. Why? Because still, as they spent a huge amount of money in Afghanistan, but still, we need to just go for higher education in other countries. Why? And this is my question. Why the Americans, why the government of America still is successful to bring security? Still, we cannot even, right now, if you know the situation, you're all Democrats, Republicans, you know the situation. Right now, we cannot live in the capital of Afghanistan, in Kabul. Other parts, they are just not secure and you cannot even go there. So why? My question is why you couldn't, America failed. America just failed to bring security in Afghanistan in 14 years.
I don't know the answers. I know my son was there for a year, and he was in the areas that were not secure. And he was there with the Marines, and one of their big jobs was to protect girls who were going to go to school. Why it failed, I don't know.
I don't know either. I mean, it seemed in the beginning we were only sort of half there, not fully committed. And then there was obviously the surge to put more people there, and then that didn't work. And it's tough fighting terrorists because you're not fighting a real enemy. You're fighting a phantom enemy that is just doing things unpredictably, and it's hard to scout that out.
But that's your country. Why do you think it did?
I don't know. I just asked you that why America failed to bring security in Afghanistan.
Yeah, I don't know. I know there were people that went there well-intentioned and believed what they were doing and were willing to risk their lives for it. And I know there were a lot of people that were disappointed that it didn't work better.
But what about, according to Trump or Clinton, the new plans for Afghanistan?
I don't know, they haven't said too much about Afghanistan lately.
Yeah, America, you know, it's been 14 years, and I know Russia went through the same thing. They were there for a long time too. Yeah, I don't know the answer to this hard situation, obviously.
It will not be influenced for the results of the elections.
Was this Gary Johnson?
Gary Johnson, yeah.
Well, honestly, he was the guy I was going to vote for, and he was the guy my children were going to vote for. He had a big blunder yesterday where he didn't know one of the cities in Syria, so that didn't help him. But that was one mistake, and I seen how he was trying to recover from it. I thought, you know, he's doing a decent job. In America now, if a third-party candidate gets 15% support in polls, they'll get to participate in the debates. So if Gary Johnson is able to get up to 15% in the polls, and if he's able to participate in the debate, all of a sudden, a candidate who is very little known in America will be up on the stage with two very unpopular candidates, but he will be in front of millions of Americans who are looking to make the right decision. And if he gets on the debate stage, and if he does a good job, I think it could turn into a three-way race fairly easily, because there are a number of voters who are looking and wishing they had an alternative to vote for.
Yeah, I don't think he's going anywhere. He's at about 7%. He made a big blunder about Aleppo yesterday, so I think even the news media has already sort of cast him aside. So at the end of the day, I think he gets the votes of the people who can't choose between the other two and just need to vote for somebody.
But recently, like Mitt Romney, who was the Republican nominee for governor 4 years ago, he's been saying that Gary Johnson should be able to participate in the debates because he is getting 16% in some of the states. So he's starting to attract attention. He's running far better than libertarians typically do. And there was another Weld. Was it Weld? No, it wasn't Weld. So one other former governor was starting to bang the drum to let Gary Johnson participate in the debates. But if he gets up there, it could dramatically change the dynamics.
Won't happen, or they can.
It probably won't, but it may.
Yes. So I had another question connected with the internet. So as we talked about it, it's super influential in American politics right now, and what people say on the internet really makes a huge difference. But now, as we see, Facebook, Twitter, even YouTube started, putting some censorship into their business, banning people with particular political beliefs. Do you think this trend for censorship is going to grow, and this internet discussion thing will look totally different in a few years from now?
I hope not, because one of the things I cherish about America is our ability to speak freely. I'm a big believer in the First Amendment. And one trend in this election that I find very troubling is the fact that the press, which tends to be more liberal and more democratic, but has typically been fairly objective in covering the news in America, the press has decided on its own that Trump is so dangerous. Many of the reporters have said, I'm not going to be objective. I think Trump is so dangerous, I'm going to put my objectivity aside and just report the news the way I think it should be reported. That's really distressing, because it's a trend that may not stop at this election if they get away with it. I mean, then why wouldn't they decide, well, we're smarter, we're better informed, so we should decide and help the people decide how to make their decisions based on the information we think is important to them.
Okay, so this is where we're going to disagree. Donald Trump has banned the press from covering him. He's taken away the press credentials of major newspapers like the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN, said, no, I'm not allowing you into my events. Unprecedented in American campaigning. He's criticized the press openly. He's targeted reporters, said he won't do interviews with major news anchors. he made fun of a reporter who was in a wheelchair and disabled by going like this about him. I mean, the man is dangerous when it comes to dealing with the press. It's his best friend and his worst enemy, and the worst enemy when they essentially report what he says and the implications of that and what he does. And I actually have a complete opposite feeling of Ray. I think what Trump has done with the press in this campaign is really dangerous, how other candidates can act, because we depend on the press to cover and interpret everything that these candidates are doing and saying. And when they're shut out of rooms, when they're thrown off planes, when they're told they can't be a moderator for something, like even somebody from Fox he said he wouldn't want. I mean, I think that's a really dangerous precedent. They have to be the referees in the debate. They're the ones with the striped shirt. And when one candidate says, well, I don't like that reporter, I'm not allowing that paper to cover me, then you're going to get, essentially propaganda.
But from the other point of view, you have Hillary Clinton, who has not had a news conference in almost 300 days, where she'll talk to individual reporters, but it's in a situation where it's really controlled. News conferences, political consultants hate because it exposes the candidate to a barrage of questions by some very aggressive reporters, and she doesn't want to have a news conference. I agree with what you're saying about Donald Trump, absolutely, but I think it's very dangerous for the press to start deciding we're going to cover it the way we think it should be covered. We're going to cover it with our political or personal bias as our guide. That's not their job. We have editorial pages and opinion pages where they can express their opinion about how dangerous they think Donald Trump is. But when it comes to actual news, there really should be balance. And if they get shut out of the event, they got to figure out a way to get into it.
Thank you. Some media resources say that Hillary Clinton was getting a lot of money for her campaign from big corporations. Was it a big problem to gain trust from people that Hillary Clinton is going to protect their rights and not just the rights of the interests of the corporations,
Well, let me lay it out for you. Just about every American politician who runs at that level gets money from corporations, even the state of California. That's because we don't have public financing where we get money from a campaign fund that's not directly tied to someone, something the Republicans are bitterly opposed to because it's paid with tax dollars. That's the source of funding, individuals and corporations. What happened is the Supreme Court, the Republican majority, decided that corporations are people too. So corporations can spend an unlimited amount of money now electing the candidates of their choice. So that dynamic has changed the way campaigns are being funded. And they're being funded oftentimes not by the candidates' campaigns themselves, but by outside groups that don't even coordinate with the campaign. They just do their own thing. And it's become more money and more money and more money and more money. So candidates really, unless you're Bernie Sanders, who got $27 average contribution from several million people, who still lost, it's hard to do. Trump is now tapping into that too. He's got a lot of small individual donors, but it's not enough. The cost of television advertising, Ray, tell me, for a week in California is how much?
In Los Angeles alone, for a week of television, it's over $1 million.
So $1 million for 1 week in one city. Multiply that by America.
Yeah. And understand, it's not just corporations that are spending a whole lot of money. It's labor unions as well. All the special interest groups tend to spend money. Not tend to spend money, they do spend money. But, yeah.
Given those facts, one may have an impression that this is not really a presidential race, it's a money race of those who support the candidates, and it reminds me of this famous movie, Wag the Dog. You may be familiar with that. Смотрели фильм «Хвост виляет собакой», when this political consultant was commissioned to distract people from President's love affair, and they created virtual war in Albania with all that money. So this current presidential race, is it more about issues social, economic issues, about vision of the future both candidates have, or it's about personalities, who will be in charge, can we trust this manager? Like there are two managers applying for the same job, right? What matters more to American people and to public issues or personalities?
We're trying to figure that out.
No, I think the answer is yes, it's both. You know, the old test for a lot of Americans for who you vote for president is who would you rather have a beer with? Which of the candidates? Which do you think, you know, is more like you? Who will fight for you? A campaign slogan for many people is working for you, fighting for you. It's all a personal decision. This year we have one extraordinary size personality and somebody that other people know. So it's sort of now a battle of personalities. And, you know, ideas and proposals sort of channel through that, but it's more about personality. People are working, they have kids to put in bed, they have to cook dinner, they gotta go to work. They don't have a lot of time to sort through 100 policy positions. Look at Hillary's website, she's got like 2,500 policy positions. I think Trump has like 8. You know, it's so people aren't spending their time focusing on policy.
I think they're looking for a leader. They're troubled about, a lot of them are troubled about the direction America is headed, and they're looking for a leader that they can trust to help move America in a direction that they think is a better direction. And for me, it fascinates me because a lot of what I do with television and that type of thing, it's not just words, it's not programs, it's not policies, it's image. And it's based on the notion that as people, we make judgments about other people. Most of the judgments we make aren't based on what the other person is saying, but just how we perceive them. If we look at them, you know, what's our gut reaction to them? Because there's been studies done showing that people make split-second decisions about other people that they say, where they can tell whether or not that person is likely to be a leader, that person is likely to be somebody they can trust, you know, so they're. And so in this case, I think, you know, they're also looking at Clinton and Trump, just trying to measure them as people, not listening to what they're saying, but just trying to decide, you know, do I trust this person? Do I believe that they're a strong leader and can, you know, take the country in the direction I think it should go?
First of all, thank you for an interesting lecture. And my question...
It was a dialogue, it was not a lecture.
Yeah, it was a dialogue. And my question is, can you tell without any preconceptions, without any your own personal views, tell who is likely to be the winner of this presidential race?
Well, I predicted Trump could never win the Republican nomination, so you shouldn't ask me.
Oh, you can ask me then. No, I'm pretty confident that Hillary will win, and I'll tell you why. And it has a lot boiling down to the actual mechanics of an election and how you get votes in the box. And I'll give you an example of the state of Florida, a state that both of the candidates need to win. Hillary now has 51 offices that have been up and running for more than 2 months with volunteers and people who identified the people they need to get the vote. Trump has 0. And at the end of the day, it's getting you people that support you to actually vote, because about half of Americans don't bother. And I don't think it'll be much bigger than that this year, despite the big election. And if you look around the country in those key states we talked about earlier, Ohio and everywhere else, at the end of the day, I think that's what really makes a difference. I mean, we're in this business to make sure that happens. Bernie Sanders filled a lot of stadiums. He had a lot of enthusiasm on Facebook, but he lost because he couldn't get his voters to the polls. So Hillary has to continue to motivate people to get excited about her and then deliver those votes, and she wins. The Trump path to winning is very, very difficult because he has to win states that she can afford to lose a couple. And so he has to be all over the place. She can narrow her focus and win those states and win. So just from a strategic, operational perspective, I think that's the reason she'll win, not on a bigger message, kind of loftier personality scale.
She does have a problem in that there's a lot of enthusiasm among Trump supporters. I mean, they're enthused about this guy. Some of her key constituencies aren't as enthused about her. So yeah, big challenge is motivating her voters and getting them excited about a candidate they're not excited about. Trump doesn't have an operation. He's, like, again, defying all of, the political ground rules, but he's still tied. And he's still tied in the states where, both of them, either one of them have to win. So will there be enough enthusiasm on his part, on his side, to make up for his lack of campaign infrastructure? It's hard to say, but when Hillary first ran against Barack Obama, she had a huge ground operation, a political operation, and she still lost. It's not just the mechanics of the campaign, it's the enthusiasm and the excitement for the candidate. And we have two candidates that people aren't very excited about.
So what if Hillary Clinton will be a president of USA? What will her politics and attitude to the situation in Ukraine?
She's been very tough about Ukraine. She was very strong in favor of the sanctions. She is a strong defender of NATO. I think you see her probably being a little tougher than Obama. She has worked with all our European allies and wanted to get them together, I think, even earlier with a comprehensive strategy, because the way she sees it, most Americans see it, is that was something that should have never happened. So I think you will see a very firming up of that decision and anything else that comes from that. Trump, I don't know.
He, at one point, suggested we should pull out of NATO, so... So it's really hard to predict what he would do.
Yeah, across the board, I think Hillary will be very much like Obama, maybe even stronger in some places in terms of more military involvement. Certainly Syria and some other places. But again, she's a diplomat. She's been able to do a lot of things with a lot of countries, and she's very well respected. So we'll see.
Вопрос про Северную Корею. Сегодня утром появилась новость, что они появилась новость, что они испытывали опять ядерное оружие. И вот, собственно, вопрос. Какие, по вашему мнению, есть решения по данному вопросу, потому что мир и так наш неспокоен. То есть, война в Сирии сейчас с ИГИЛ или там в Турции конфликт. И поэтому это один из, наверное, самых важных вопросов, чтобы не допустить новой войны.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that all of a sudden American voters start thinking beyond just the issues back home and start looking around the world and say, wow. Korea, I mean, I would think you'd need the help of China, certainly. I don't know what the answer is.
Well, in North Korea, there you have a situation where someone is very unreasonable, doesn't work with the rest of the world, doesn't take orders from even China anymore, unpredictable. Very impressed with showing off how powerful he is, why people suffer, unbelievable suffering in that country. That's a situation where the world has to get together and deal with that, not just the United States, not just China. I think everybody's got to get together on that. And I think the same thing in Syria. That we have a very different view about President Assad. President Obama says he has to go because he's been a butcher, killing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of women, children, families, and he has to go. Different approaches to getting there. Certainly both our countries want to wipe out ISIS, but different approaches what the long-term solution is there. And there's going to be a lot of competition in that area, and it's not just those two countries. Yemen, all of those other countries are all having problems. Turkey, Syria, just that whole region has been a mess for a long time. I don't know what the long-term solution is. I know the one thing Americans are most scared about is, okay, what happens if we, quote, win? Then what? Who takes charge? Who will be running these countries? We have situations like Libya, where Gaddafi's gone, but there's so many different people running that country right now, no one can rely on them for anything. So we need to think longer term, and we have to think together as a world about how we have to face those issues. And so you're not going to hear a lot about detail among the candidates about these things, because, you know, I think both our candidates don't think we can do this alone. We need the world community.
Yeah, especially now as more and more countries are getting access to nuclear materials and nuclear weapons. There are some groups that would like to use them. And that's a big concern with North Korea. That was a big concern among some Americans about the Iran deal, that it would allow them to get weaponized, you know, materials sooner, which just makes the world more dangerous.
So back to the election. If Hillary wins, how do you think she will deal with the Red Congress? Because it looks like Obama administration, current administration, Democratic administration finds it hard to handle it right now, today.
Yeah, well, the elections, if things hold, there'll be more Democrats in Congress. We're not sure who will actually control, but probably Republicans, at least one of the two houses, if not both. She was a senator. She knows sort of the game. The criticism of Obama is he didn't understand and deal real well with the Congress, personality-wise. One thing that Hillary was known for was the ability actually to work with Republicans and get things done. She passed some big bills together with Republicans. So I think she'll be more engaging with the Congress and trying to find solutions. Don't get me wrong, there's many Republicans who already have a plan to try to defeat her. Somebody wrote today, it was funny, that the day one of her administration, she'd get sworn in, and some Republicans would file a motion to impeach her to get her out of office on her first day. So there's some people like that. But I think she'll be more engaging in the Congress and be more successful than Obama has been.
And I mean, that's just politics. I mean, as soon as your opponent wins a race, you at one level start figuring out, okay, well, how do I defeat them? But somebody like Speaker Ryan, who hopefully he'll continue as Speaker of the House, I think he would be the kind of Republican who will work well with Hillary. He has great respect for the process of government and the institution of government. He's experienced enough to know how it works and what you need to do to reach compromise and, you know, make the process work. So I actually think that together, if they you know, do team up, they could get some good stuff done. If they team up.
Yeah, it's funny, Speaker Ryan, who's the head Republican in Congress, agreed with Hillary today about Trump's comments on RTV. So, you know, that's how the dynamics are changing.
Well, time flies, and if I may ask like a concluding question that may be of interest to those students who can consider career as a consultant. What makes a good political consultant? What can you recommend our students to do to become good political consultants? Any advices based on your great experience?
I've been doing it a long time, and my advice would be, you gotta love politics. You gotta love people. You have to have an interest in human psychology to try and figure out what motivates people to do what impacts their decision making. You have to be idealistic and not allow yourself to become totally cynical. There's a part of me that's cynical, but if you lose the idealism that encouraged you to get involved in politics, then you probably won't do a very good job. And you won't like doing the work. You got to believe that what you're doing is actually something that's going to help make things better.
Yeah, it's having worked for a lot of them, it's very difficult to be a politician. Mm-hmm. Every move you make in the United States can be recorded, seen. You have to reveal your financial data. Your family gets in the news. You're followed around by TV cameras sometimes. While not making a lot of money doing that either. Most of the people we're seeing in politics today, California, are already wealthy. It's not what they go into business to do because of their passion, but they do it because they have the time to do it. Unfortunately, some as a hobby. So as a consultant, for me, it's real important to a few things. First of all, know what's going on in the world. Read, because information is still power. There's a lot of information, and we've talked about data mining and targeting and strategic uses of data. That's one thing, but you also have a good gut to know what's right and what's wrong. I don't think the people advising Donald Trump have a good gut. They're just doing things to get him in the news rather than thinking long-term about what's good for him. Seems to be working, that's it, but you know, it's a different kind of thing. And the other thing is always be honest. In my business, when I deal with the news media, if I ever lie, if I ever exaggerate, the reporter is never going to come back to me to ask me anything else because I've just misled them, and their job is to report the facts. So if somebody asks me about what so-and-so did about something and I mislead them, my credibility is gone. So don't ever lose your credibility in what you do because it's the most important thing you have.
Yeah, and I absolutely underscore that. Once people don't believe you, once they don't trust you, it's almost impossible to recover their trust.
Let us all think about this.